What I'd like to do right now is open up both to the questions that we've seen in the chat box, and again, feel free to post other questions in there, but also to go back to the questions we collected from registrants. And I think, Katy, we'll start with you on this one, but Lisa, feel free to chime in as well. So the first question, actually there are sort of two questions that are tied together. The first one is, who are the key staff that are not directly in tied to the project, but who you need to have on board? And then if you could talk a little bit about some modifications, Katy, that you've made over the years. And then Lisa, feel free to talk about some of the things that you've seen on a national level, and then we'll sort of keep it rolling. Thanks so much, guys.
Sure. So I would say the number one stakeholder that has to be engaged in this work is the building leader, the building principal. They can be the biggest advocate for an induction program, or the biggest hurdle or barrier to being able to work effectively. And so it's really important that the mentors establish and maintain a relationship with that building leader. And while our mentor relationships with our teachers are confidential, still being able to, communicate openly. And, we have the saying that confidentiality is not secrecy. So finding that line and that balance and that three-way communication. So we have processes that we've put in place for our mentors to engage with those building principals and get information about their school and their vision and the areas that they'd like them to focus on with the teachers, and then also have those what we call triad conversations, so that both the mentor and the new teacher and that building principal have opportunities to sit and discuss the work as well. So I would definitely say the building principal is key. In terms of modifications to our program, I talked a little bit about sort of the way that we've changed and evolved over the last 6 years. But I think the biggest thing that we've done recently is that addition of a really strategic approach to classroom management. The new teacher center processes are really, they call it instructional mentoring, and it's critical. It's huge. It's where we ultimately want to be. But we have found that sometimes if we don't have the strong management, it can really be the hurdle to being able to engage in those instructional conversations. So adding on that new approach to classroom management support was a big addition for us last year, and a big lift and a big leap. But we're excited about being able to kind of continue to embed that into our work.
Great. Lisa, do you have some experience with how programs change over time, or what sort of modifications you've seen over the years?
Well, I guess I just wanted to reiterate Katy's point that having time built in for mentor teams to talk with principals about the work, and for principals to really have access to the training and developing a deeper understanding of what mentors are actually doing is really critical, because it's, we want our principals to be embedded in the instructional leadership in their building, and this is a fundamental part of that. So the more they understand what's actually going on, and the more they can see the work evolve over time, and where there are challenges or where there are things to celebrate, I think it's just a huge advantage. So building that in is really critical.
Great, thanks. One of the other questions that came up through the registration process, and I know, Katy, you talked a little bit about collecting data from the folks who are impacted by the program, is what are the tools that you're using to track the effectiveness of coaching? Lisa, also feel free to chime in on this one, since I know that there's a number of different ways to collect data, and that is an area of expertise for you.
Sure, I can speak to that. I've talked a lot about our partnership with New Teacher Center, and we're very fortunate that they've developed tools and a platform for us to be able to collect data on the work that we're doing out in the field every day. It provides us the ability to track and collect information on just simply how many the interactions, how much time are we spending out with our teachers, what are the processes we're doing, but also sort of, how much of that time is spent planning, how much of that time is spent in cycles of observation and feedback, and how much of that time is spent doing those other types of processes. And so that's where we kind of use that. That's that data that really tells the story of what we do. In order to really sort of gauge our effectiveness, historically we really relied on that survey data. We do mid-year and end-of-year surveys. We survey the teachers that we support as well as their administrators. We also survey each mentor every year to get their perception of the program and how effective they felt their work was that year. And then, of course, the big elephant in the room is the retention piece that we're constantly working to track. Part of our work with New Teacher Center, though, this year is going to be developing a program impact plan to really beef up the level of data that we're able to collect and share to track our effectiveness. And so we're excited to work with them and learn what other districts have done to measure the effectiveness of induction and coaching programs and see how we can just continue to measure and expand on that.
And Lisa, how else have you seen the data gathering process used to figure out how impactful or effective the coaching or mentoring programs are?
Well, in addition to what Katy has already mentioned, which are all great tools, I think a few resources come to mind just thinking about the impact of mentoring itself. We haven't really talked a lot about mentor standards, but those are really important, not just for tracking effectiveness, but also as a guidepost for mentors to really understand the work and, to use as a guidepost for the work and as a tool for reflection as well as the assessment of mentoring. So that's one big piece. Another piece which Katy touched on is like a mentoring log. So all of the interactions between mentors and new teachers, actually tracking that. And some, as Katy mentioned, some of that can be done through a tracking tool like what the New Teacher Center has developed. But if you don't have access to something like that, even tracking it in your own software or in hard copies, that can be really useful as well. And looking at that across a mentoring group and thinking about that as mentors get together for PLCs or for communities of practice where they're thinking about their own mentoring practice, that can be really beneficial. And then finally, I think, let's see, sorry, I had a third thing. I'm not sure I'll remember it. The mentor logs. And then, the third thing, is, as Katy mentioned, the time of having a coach actually observe the mentor in that conversation with new teachers, that kind of in-the-moment feedback, it can be really, really helpful to a mentor in terms of giving really targeted feedback. The conversations that mentors have with new teachers are really complex. It's not as straight as just, telling somebody what to do. You have to be really mindful about how you're approaching things and really empower the teacher to do the work themselves and to think of things in a reflective way. So that difficult work, it's important to have a coach kind of support the mentor in that, and that kind of support, I think, can just be incredibly valuable.
Katy, could you talk a little bit about how, you've talked a lot about how the mentors support the teachers. How does the district support the mentors during the school year?
Yeah, so there's the series of professional learning that they will receive is actually, it's pretty intensive. It's 8 days over the course of the school year, 2-day modules kind of spread out throughout the course of the school year. And then we do forums, frequent forums, where they come Friday afternoons, and I meet with them, and we look at program data. They do their own goal setting. We do work around them identifying a case study teacher in which they kind of track and think about how they need to modify and adjust their support. So I'm just throwing all the things out there that are coming to my mind. But then a big part of it is that in-field support. Myself and my lead mentor try to get out with them frequently to do just what Lisa described, watch their interactions, provide them with real-time feedback, and just things to help them develop in their practice. We're very fortunate, again, that we have new teacher centers expertise to rely on as well in this work, and that we also have our partnership with the Center for Transformative Teaching for that video support. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's really comprehensive, and it's I think as a result, we've developed some really talented individuals, and really excited about the team that we have.
Great. There's one other question that came up that I wanted to share with folks, and that is, how have the mentoring programs impacted retention and recruitment of teachers? I know, Katy, you talked a little bit about it. Before I get both you and Lisa to sort of give maybe a little bit more insight into that, I did want to share my conversation with Kelly Crosstag from the Escambia, Florida School District, who was going to be one of our presenters. When she and I talked, have been talking over the last year about their mentoring program, and she mentioned specifically the use of the mentoring program as a recruitment tool at a time when there are states and districts that are struggling to attract teachers. The high-quality mentoring program is something that they use as a very specific recruiting tool. In a conversation I had with somebody up in Rochester, New York, where they have a long-time teacher mentoring, not just for new service teachers, but also for experienced teachers. He talked about the use of the mentoring program as a way to ensure that teacher evaluation was being done holistically. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective on the value of the work. But I'd love to hear from both Lisa and Katy what your experiences have been, or what the research says about this idea of using mentoring as a retention or recruitment practice.
Yeah, and Lisa, I can go first if you want. You're all right. You're spot on. As a matter of fact, our new teacher mentors are typically one or two of them attends every hiring fair that we have within the district and shares information about the program. It's definitely a selling point for attracting new teachers, letting them know that there's this system of support and this individuals are committed to them being successful. So it's definitely something that we work with our talent management team on. And then, on the other side, the retention, a lot of our work is ensuring they're successful so they'll want to stay in a job where they're seeing success, and then having those stay conversations along the way, and also being a radar. If we feel like somebody's is starting to slip and that we might lose them, like just sort of knowing, when it's time to, bring in other supports or other resources and just get them what they need to stay and be successful.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that I've seen just in our review of ESSA plans, states are really thinking about induction as a tool for addressing teacher shortages, and so that's leveraging teacher recruitment and retention. In terms of the research, I think when you look at the large body of research, I think we initially started thinking about teacher retention and induction being a solution to problems around teacher retention. And there were a number of studies conducted around that. And then over time, we started to become much more interested in thinking about impact and how induction is impacting student learning. And so we have now a number of studies that are getting to a point where they have really good, solid research around that, and less of an emphasis on retention. So really, what's great to see is, districts like Tulsa, where they're collecting retention data and really making use of that to make this argument. I think the more we can put energies into that, the better off we'll be in terms of making an argument for having high-quality induction that is really supported by the research.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thanks to all of the attendees who posted questions. whether they did it in the registration portion or whether they did it during the presentation. A number of people have asked how the information is going to be shared. We will share all of the resources, and the PowerPoint presentation was an online archive, and you'll be getting some information about that. We also ask that you make sure to fill out the end of webinar survey. If you want to contact any of us, you've been given email addresses. I want to make sure everybody has mine as well. It's pretty simple. It's dfireside@air.org. I also encourage you to visit the REL Southwest website, which is relsouthwest.sedl.org, and of course, follow us on Twitter. Remember that we do have some other webinars coming up through the REL Southwest. There's the Research Partnership to Support High-Quality Professional Learning, Tuesday, September 19th, from 2:30 to 4 o'clock Central Time. Also, the Exploring Educator Mobility, Supply, and Demand on Wednesday, October 4th, from 12 to 1:30 Central Time. Please make sure you fill out that survey. The link is already in the chat box. I want to thank both of our presenters for taking time today to share their experiences. I also want to thank the amazing staff at REL Southwest who have supported, Jackie and Marguerite and everybody else who helped us put all of this together. And I want to thank you, the participants, for showing up and sticking with us. I really appreciate all of the questions and feedback. I look forward to hearing from you. And again, from the REL Southwest, we thank you very much for attending. Have a great rest of your afternoon.